Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be in conversation with Aarti Kumar Rao, the author of this amazing book, Margin Lands, Indian Landscapes on the Brink. The book was shortlisted for the Tata Literature Live First Book Nonfiction Award, and it's also shortlisted for today's award, the Atta Galata Award. And Aarti has been named as, by the BBC as one of 2023's 100 most influential women. So I loved reading this book. And this takes you on a journey through India's awe-inspiring landscapes, and yet very vulnerable landscapes, often on the brink of destruction. We journey from the Thar Desert to the Ganga, from Ladakh to the coast of Kerala, and much more. The descriptions are so visual, they need to be read with care. To imagine yourself transported into those landscapes, you've got to take the time to savor Aarti's amazingly lyrical descriptions. If you rush through the book, you will miss the trees for the forest. One of the most evocative moments in the book for me was when you write about the local names for different kinds of clouds in the desert. Maybe we can talk a bit more about that. So the factual parts are intercut with these amazing vivid descriptions that draw you in, whether it is of fishing in the Brahmaputra at night, along with a dolphin and two fishermen, or walking the sand dunes in the desert. And these descriptions are not there for the sake of it. They contain a very strong element of storytelling. And I think that's what this book is all about. It tells a vivid story of India's landscapes. And Aarti, you also went through a lot of physical hardship in researching these stories. You've talked about slipping and sliding through treacherous mangroves, narrowly avoiding getting sucked into the quagmire. You've talked about battling damdim flies in Arunachal Pradesh, where you've written, the damdims are everywhere. Their anticoagulating bite has my blood flowing freely from my hands and other parts of my body. So a beautifully written, very moving book, and an urgent call for action to stop the destruction of some of these beautiful fragile landscapes. So let me start by asking you, how would you explain the term margin lands in your title? What do you mean by lands which are on the margin?
Thank you, Tejaswini, and congratulations yourself. She's been winning many awards too. Her book is also up there and out there. Margin lands is beyond, the way I saw it, is beyond the physical landscape. It goes across geographies, and while it might seem like it's on the margins and it's out there, it's really not about the land, the physical or the geography of the land itself, but really about how front and center it is in our psyche or on our radar. It's something that we really don't pay attention to when we're doing our planning. Or not just the land itself, it could be people, it could be livelihoods we don't pay attention to, it could be hydrology that we don't pay attention to. It's something that is basically not on our radar and is at the edges of our radar. So those are the margins that I'm really talking about. And it's also something that is on the precipice, it's on the brink, and it's in huge danger of just tipping over. So there are lives that are on the brink, traditional livelihoods. There's the resilience of the land, which is on the brink because of things that are happening to the land, that we are doing to the land. So in many ways, margin lands is not about lands somewhere far away. Even if we just took a walk around the neighborhood of this hotel, we will find margin lands. We will find it within homes. We will find it within people, within communities, and unfortunately, of course, also in the landscape itself.
So on that note, I was fascinated to see that you've included Bombay in one of your chapters. And I'm from Bombay, so I had to ask this question. Bombay is one of the wealthiest cities, culturally very mainstream, and yet it appears in a book called Margin Lands. Can you say something about that?
Yes, it's my city too. Tejaswini, we have that in common. Again, you know, it's a very wealthy city. Sorry, is this better? Okay. It is a very wealthy city and, of course, the commercial capital of India. But in so many ways, it is, again, there are facets of it which do not make it front and center when it comes to planning for the city. It's a coastal city, and very few people probably realize the damage that you do to the coastline and what repercussions it can have then on the city. And Bombay is, I think, this number keeps changing, but it was in the top 5 cities that are going to be most affected by climate change in the next few years, and X amount of GDP that is going to be, lost, and so on. So while it is a wealthy city, again, there are these small micro habitats and ways to look at the city which need to be on our radar when it comes to planning, which often aren't. And the other thing is, of course, that it is a magnet for migrants, for people coming from all over, but it is a city bursting at the seams. It's not equipped. Many of our cities are not equipped to handle that. So in many ways, again, it's on the margins. It's so much a part of us, and yet we don't think of it in terms where it'll be doing right by the city. And unfortunately, that again is the definition of the marginal lands, and that's why it made it into the book.
I was struck by the cover of your book. It's a beautiful charcoal drawing, black and white, with a fisherman. It's a rather bleak cover. So I wondered, was this your suggestion to the publisher? Because often the publisher decides, the author doesn't. And secondly, related to that question, the situation is in fact very bleak. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's a fitting cover. So how do you deal with achieving a balance in your reporting, where on the one hand, you want to convey to your readers the urgency of the situation, the bleakness of the situation, and on the other hand, you don't want to present such a grim and hopeless picture that the reader just looks away in despair and says, nothing to do about it, it's a losing battle. What can I do? So how do you achieve that balance?
Yeah, so about the cover, yes, that was a design I suggested to the publishers, and then we worked together to make it happen. It is a charcoal drawing of a photograph I took in the Bangladeshi Sundarban. And it's of a fisherman fishing in those waters just after an oil spill. And so all the fish that he picked up, and even the net that he draws up, that he's drawing up in that drawing as well, was covered in oil. And so it is a bleak picture. It was a bleak moment in time that was captured by the photograph as well. The situation is bleak. However, in every one of these places I have been to, and I really hope it comes out in the book, the people I meet are full of hope. So while they are living in treacherous landscapes and they're living disenfranchised and terrible lives, they have this hope that something is going to change and they give me hope. So many times I come back home and they call me to find out if I have reached okay, how my life is, and so on, and then they tell me what they're full of making it work, making it happen, in spite of the things that are going on there. And of course, I meet despair as well, and it's a tricky balance between hope and despair. It's also very tricky to come back to a house over a roof over your head when you have seen such crazy lives being lived out there. So it's hard striking that balance, and while it is many stories of despair, I do hope that collective action and things that we can do, every one of us, to change the narrative is also part of that book. And I hope that comes through. And turning away is not an option. I mean, how can that be an option, right? So it really is up to us to change that narrative.
You have peppered your book with some very beautiful and evocative photographs of the landscapes and your own drawings. Do you think there are some things which words simply can't convey? I'm asking you because you're also a photographer. So are there some things which words simply can't convey? And conversely, do you feel there are some photographs which really come into their own when supported by words? So what is the interplay of the visual and the words in your work?
Thank you very much for that question. It's something that my editor, Prem Panikar, he's hopefully somewhere here, and I constantly discuss that, a story can be told in so many ways. It can only be told in words, it can only be told in photographs, but what is right for the story, and all of these are tools. So when people ask me to define whether I am a photographer or a writer, I always say, no, I can't say that, because I just tell a story, but I use these different tools in the best way possible to tell the story. So there are some parts of a story that are best told through images, through moving images, through sound, or through words, or through drawings, illustrations, and so on. And there are some which need, especially a topic as complex as the environment. It is not binary, it's not this or that. There are always gray areas. And it's such a complex thing that you need words to describe and to go deeper into things. So for me, even if I did shoot a picture, I know so often a picture is taken out of context. Every flood is billed as climate change, and it isn't. It could be a very different proximal cause, And so, again, that book is full of those stories as well. So it's important to, yes, have the pictures, because that is evocative in a different way. But then the words are paramount, I feel, for something as complex as this.
And what about the use of sound? Your author biography also says you communicate through writing and visuals, but also through soundscapes. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's interesting, when we read or when we, we consume stuff, we are using our senses. And every sense brings with it a layer of information. So, of course, visual. And then when you read, there are words and so on. But then the ears, the nose, how you feel, all of that are layers of information which adds richness to the story. And so I have noticed that sound is a fantastic layer of information about the landscape, because a landscape, how it sounds in the morning, very different from how it sounds in the afternoon, very different from how it sounds at night. And to record this and to not lose that, to be able to protect that is very important. So I'm enjoying my tryst really with exploring sound and soundscapes.
And I'm assuming, soundscapes probably change a lot as many of these destructive changes take place. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense that there should perhaps be an archive of sounds capturing soundscapes that are being lost?
Absolutely, I would love that. And I think there are. I don't know that it is in a place that is consumable, but I'm sure people have, all of us record things all the time. And having an archive of sounds and soundscapes and the changing soundscapes is actually going to be part of my next, the project that I'm doing now, the next project.
What is that project?
So these are degraded lands, and the lands that I've described in the book have people living on it. And when those lands get degraded, the people are forced to move. And so the next project is about the forced human migration from those degraded landscapes to our cities and to other places as well. So it's about that. But then it's about how things have changed. So it's going to be part of that.
What is your process of gathering information and then putting it all together in words, photos, and drawings? Give us a peek into your working life. What is a typical working day for you?
Oh gosh, I wish it was something that I could tell you which would sound really intelligent. I book a one-way ticket, I go to a landscape, I have maybe the name of one person in my pocket. This whole thing began at a cafe coffee day in the center of town with Vishwanath, who's sitting here, who told me the name of one person and gave me his phone number. I put it in my pocket and went with that to Rajasthan, and then tried to find Chatar Singh. Those of you who have read the book know who Chatar Singh is. So it all started with that. It's really, I wish I had a nice little, neat little plan tied up with a bow, but that's precisely what it is. It's a one-way ticket. It's maybe a name or two in my pocket of people to meet when I go there, and then I let serendipity take its course, and I go with the flow. So it's, wake up in the morning and meet people and see, hear stories, constantly listen, a lot of listening, no talking, a lot of listening. And then one thing leads to another, because that's how things are. Everything is interconnected. And so you discover those connections, you tease out those connections just by meeting, yeah.
And your method of collecting information in the field, are you recording on tape or?
Yeah, so I do a lot of tape because there are so many different languages in India and I don't want to miss anything. So I tape everything I speak to people about, and they tell me, so everything's recorded. Photography, I almost use it as a proxy and as a memory aid because I'm constantly shooting. So when I come back, I know how various places looked, and if I'm lucky and I've been a good girl, I have actually made notes. Oftentimes that doesn't happen, but much to the chagrin of my editors, they're like, you didn't make notes. So, but I'm a little lazy that way. But again, just being immersed in the landscape and using your senses and just trying to gather information in all those different ways, it helps, of course, finally when I sit and write.
And do you also draw while you're in the field?
No, not at all. I'm not a natural artist at all. I'm self-taught and I'm still teaching myself. It comes hard for me. But when I come home, I know, like there was this one time when deep in the Northeast, there's no electricity there, there's no network. And this lady told me about how she would notice how the sun outside her window, as it rose, the shadow would move, and that she would be able to tell time that way, and that's how much time they would ferment a certain thing that she was cooking for. And so things like that, it's such a visual description even when she said it. So then I would just make like little squiggly drawings, but the kinds of drawings you see in the book, I have to sit down and use reference pictures and so on and make it. So I'm not natural.
You've made, so the Thar Desert chapter is my favorite in the book. I love that. And you've made a really fascinating point about centralized education in the Thar Desert, where you've said that children are taught to draw the map of India, but not of their own locality. And where they are losing the words or the language for different kinds of clouds, water, plants. This language is dwindling out of memory. And where the absence or the existence of a vocabulary is a marker of the connection to the land. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be more local-centric education. That was a fascinating point you made. And what is often deemed, something that outsiders don't necessarily get, is that what is often deemed a desert wasteland is actually a place of water and vegetation and enough to survive on. And when outsiders and decision makers don't understand this, the land and its ecology come under threat.
Yep.
So throughout the book, a central problem that's running through the book basically is that decisions are usually made by people who sit far away and who are not really connected with the place and the people. Sometimes these decisions seem to be made in bad faith. There seems to be a deliberate neglect of the environment, deliberately turning a blind eye to the destruction that is so obvious. At other times, there may be a sort of ignorance, maybe even a willful ignorance. So what can be done about this kind of faraway decision-making where there's such a gulf between the people who are doing the planning and the place and the people that they're planning for?
Yeah, sometimes that distance is geographical, sometimes it's just a disconnect. So very often, the people are very much here. People in Bangalore making decisions for Bangalore, but not connected with the land. What's right for Bellandur may not be right for Yelahanka, things like that. So that local geography, the essence of local geography is lost because the connect is lost. And what can be done? Well, I think the only way forward is to reclaim that connection. For all of us to wear our walking shoes, go out there to actually understand what our neighborhoods look like. What was it like before? What has it come to? if there are problems, how, why. Just walk these problems back in history, back in time, and be aware of what is right for us. Because if we don't know and we don't fight for what is right for us here, the interlopers, it's so easy for them to use marketing and propaganda and all kinds of things these days to usurp the narrative. And then, like you said, like you mentioned, there's vested interests. And then those kinds of things take over, and we land where we are in right now. So I think what can be done is all of us to take ownership of our own local geographies and understand it so that we can stand up and fight for it when it's being threatened.
Regarding the number of fish in the Brahmaputra, you've made a very particular, a very specific connection between environmental degradation and poverty in fisher folk, and the declining numbers of fish in the river. And you put it very succinctly, I quote, "It's not difficult to join the dots. No water, no fish. No fish, no money. No money, no food." When joining the dots is so simple, why is it so hard for decision makers to join the dots and make decisions accordingly? And perhaps more importantly, why is it so hard for voters to join the dots and elect leaders accordingly?
I think making connections is some of the hardest, it's the hardest thing if you are not used to observation, or if you're not used to being aware of things and, devolving things to others, other people, other things, and so on. It's important, I think, for us to, it goes back to education, where we need to understand how things connect up, I have had people tell me that, they don't want caterpillars in their backyard because it's so scary. But they don't connect the fact that the caterpillar is what becomes a butterfly. I mean, this is just one example, but these kinds of connections in nature, we have lost it. And I think I must quote over here Aldo Leopold, who said that civilization has, and he said this in 1949, I must say, he says, civilization has so cluttered this elemental man-earth relationship that awareness of it is growing dim. We imagine that industry is what supports us, forgetting what supports industry. And I think that connection, that elemental connection, when we make that connection ourselves, we'll be able to connect these dots and make a whole lot of other things. But it's until and unless we do that and we reclaim that, it's going to be very difficult to suddenly imagine that the powers that be are going to make those connections.
We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one question and then have some audience questions. You end your book with a look at the destruction of nature in urban gardens. And the book ends with a disarmingly simple call for action. You say, listen to the sounds of nature around you. Listen to the singing of the stars. My question is, what is the sound of the singing of the stars?
I think the only way I can answer that question is for all of you to go out there and listen. And I think you will all hear a song. It's the act of listening that's important, not the song itself.
Wonderful.